Good evening, I'm Isaac Ben-Ezra. This is Conversations. I'm the host and co-producer. Been doing it for about 13 years. Tonight we continue with the series of school committee members who are running for school committee in the April 3rd election here in Amherst. So put April 3 down on your calendar. That's when you'll have an opportunity to pick 2 out of 4 candidates. And all 4 candidates will be here on ACTV. You'll be able to catch it not only on when it's regularly scheduled, but it's online at your convenience. Today Amherst, tomorrow the world. So who knows, we may be breeding the next president of the United States. But seriously, well, I am serious. I'm always serious. It's a pleasure to introduce Michael Aronson. Michael Aronson is one of the 4 candidates. Michael, you have 1 child in the school system. You're a busy business person. What motivates you to run?
So, Isaac, I think that as a member of this community, as a taxpayer, a resident, a parent, I have an obligation to be involved with my community. And this particular opportunity is calling to me. My sense is that at this time the Amherst schools need oversight that is clear-eyed and can examine the numbers so that we can get a better result.
And what is your connection? Have you been involved with parent-teacher organizations? Have you been involved? Have you gone to meetings? What's your preparation to be on the board?
So as a resident, I mean, the board is made up of amateurs, of people who are not professional politicians, presumably, residents, active citizens. I have been involved with the Special Education Parent Advisory Council on the board of that organization for over a year. And that's my introduction to the community. I've also been actively involved with my child's education.
And what do you see are the 1, 2, 3 major areas of concern today?
For me?
For you?
I think that the first thing that we have to look at, and what I'm really committed to for the families of Amherst, is budgetary transparency. We need to know where the money's going. Because right now, Amherst families fund the most expensive school system in our area. I mean, it's far more expensive than the Northampton district, 30 or 40% more, and we need to examine why that's the case, and the outcomes are about the same.
Now you're connected with special education, I gather, in terms of an personal interest.
That's correct.
That's expensive, isn't it? How does that vary from other, in terms of looking at other districts? How do you ascertain that the money we spend is not in proportion to the need? Is there some information that makes you come to that conclusion?
So Isaac, I think we have to, that's a very good question. And the answer comes from looking at the data. And one thing that we do not have as citizens is unfettered access to the information about special education. We need to understand why the special education costs are so high and why administrative costs are so high in our district. And the way to do that is to get an oversight, a board of oversight, the school committee, to be very active looking at the budget. And not as a pal of the administration, but as somebody as an organization that's independent. And that's really what needs to be done. I can't answer the question as to what costs are driving special education until I can look at the numbers.
So we're talking about not only oversight, but a legal responsibility that every board has to make sure that we provide for the best needs of the children within our ability to pay for it. And you're talking about efficiency and best use of dollars, essentially.
So if we're spending $17,000 plus per student, and Northampton with a student body that's nearly identical, the same number of students, similar profiles in terms of economic distribution and special education, and there's such a dramatic difference. We have to examine why that's the case, why we have such high expenses. Our administrative costs are far higher than the state average, far higher. It amounts to something like $250 per student in excess of the state average. And we're including the eastern part of the state, which, as we all know, is where all the money is. That $250 represents, for example, new textbooks for children every year, or something that's been recently discussed as a tremendous concern in our community, the cost of fees for sports. That $250 could be paying for those fees. And my question is, how do we get it out of the administration and put it back into the classroom or on the sports fields where it belongs?
And has this issue come before the board and to the best of your recollection?
There are a number of people who have been talking about this issue for a long time. And my judgment is that the board has not paid sufficient attention to it. There was a recent study that was an internal, it seemed political to me, an internal study that was published last week by the administration, comparing Amherst to such communities as Concord, Carlisle. Northampton was largely left out of that study, although it's in a few places. But Concord, Carlisle, and Amherst are very different places. The average cost of a home in Concord, Carlisle is over $700,000. The median income is 3 times what it is in Amherst for a family. So what we need is a disinterested and unbiased analysis of what's going on in Amherst and in the Amherst Regional Schools. And I will, when I'm, and if I'm elected to the body, I will push for this very aggressively.
So the issue is we're spending a lot of money that we could move in different directions, and you gave an example of that. But we won't know until we have a study is what this adds up to, that you feel that study has not been made sufficiently.
Right. We're paying enough for a totally gold-plated system. We're paying a huge amount of money for our kids to go to school. If you offered elementary school students $17,000, they could send them to a year. They could send them to any private school in the area. Why are we paying that kind of money? I don't know. I want to find out why. I want to look at the budget, and I want to look at the budget in a way that's comparable to other districts. There's something else that's here that's very important, I think, to look at. And my approach is really data oriented. I'm interested in data and in research. We really need to take a look. These are not mysterious subjects. They're studied all over the country. We have a school of education here at UMass Amherst, I believe. I'm sure that there are plenty of studies that show where money is going in schools and school districts all around the country. We need to look at those studies. We need to examine the research, and we need to find and identify the best practices and use those practices here in Amherst. The best practices might say that there's no need for an assistant principal in every school, or they might say there is a need for one. The best practices might say that administrators should be teaching classes, 1 class a semester. I'm not sure. The best practices might indicate that administrators earning more than, say, $50,000 a year be accountable for their time. In other words, write down what they're doing during the day. In private industry, that's the way it works. If you work as a consultant and you're making above a certain amount of money, you're writing down your hours, what you're doing. I'm working with this client or that client. I'm working on this particular issue or another issue. And that way, you are accountable.
Do we have accountability now? I'm talking, but I would go beyond administrators. I think your point is well taken. that's an area that you're particularly interested. How about the rest of the school system, the people who teach the kids, the aides, the special programs?
So accountability comes from the top. You lead by example. And right now, the way I view the system, whenever there's a crisis, everyone but the administrators pay. The kids pay. They pay because the administrators choose to reduce resources going to classrooms. The teachers pay. As we see recently, there is a proposal for school choice, which is going to bring more kids and raise the class size of the average class. Or the families pay. Administrators cry and they request an increase, Prop 2.5 override. Prop 2.5, yes, Prop 2.5 override. So what you don't see is administrators saying, wow, we have to take a look in the mirror and decide, wow, we're overweight. We've got way too much administration going on for what's going on in the schools. And that's where I'm coming from. I believe that that's accountability, is looking to yourself first. And above everything, making sure that the children in our district are being well served by the tremendous amounts of money that we're spending.
Are they being well served now, in your view?
Some of them are.
And I'd be interested in knowing what your view is in terms of the changes in population and its impact on our system, and whether we're...
What changes in population? Demographic changes?
I'm talking about the student body is different than it was 10, 15 years ago. And the
so you're
impact...
talking about a demographic change?
Yeah.
I see what you're going to get from me is the response that we're spending $17,000 per student, and it's unacceptable that we're not providing for everybody. That's my view. It's a huge system. I mean, and so I'm not a sociologist. I believe that everybody's got the same human potential, and that we should be addressing that, and we should be.
What's come over, Michael, is your major concern of interest is to utilize the resources this town has in ways that are different to some extent than they appear to be used now. And you've focused in the first 10 minutes or so on your concern about our expenditures in administration. And let's move on, because I think that point has been made. And let's talk about other aspects of responsibility on a school committee. Not everybody will have the same point of view. How about the issue of, historically, of collegiality? Not just getting along, but respecting differences. What's your background in terms of working with other people? Have you been a part of a nonprofit board or other kinds of activities?
I've been in business for 20 years. And I work internationally, I work domestically. What business is, and I'm an entrepreneur, I'm independent, what business means is that you work with people with different viewpoints. They may be people from different cultures. I work in Africa, I work in the Dominican Republic, I work in Canada and the US, and I work with all different cultures, languages. And you have to find common ground, because people don't always agree in business. And the reason I'm successful at what I do is because I am able to find that common ground. Of course, local politics are always more contentious than international business. And in terms of collegiality, as you referred to it, my judgment is that it's very important to deal with the truth. When the truth is inconvenient, sometimes people get upset. Right now, the truth is quite inconvenient for certain people who are running the school district, and that is that costs are out of control, that students are getting hurt, and we need to re-examine how to get back to the basics, how to get back to a position of strength. We have the resources to run a great school system. The question is managing it well.
Okay, but we know from experience by looking at all levels of government that there's a difference between learning how to respect differences and working together and irritating the hell out of not only each other but also the community. And the community is concerned and has been concerned about the responsibility of our school committee and other administrative sources to come forward and do the work that they're there for. So I raise the issue of collegiality because that interferes sometimes. The ability not to listen sometimes interferes with the process.
Again, it's very important to recognize that there are going to be differences of opinion, and one must always, in my view, treat differences of people who have a difference of opinion with respect. And you'll never get an argument from me about that issue. If someone asks me to be quiet because I'm in the minority about a particular issue, whether it's the review of the superintendent or the creation of a new policy, I will not commit to that. I'm going to voice my opinion. That is why if someone votes for me, they're voting for me for my truth and not for some political convenience.
Well, I think there's a big gap between what's truthful and what's not collegiality. I think the important thing for the community is to know that we elect officials who sit down and listen to each other and then provide leadership to try to reach a consensus wherever it's possible. And that's what I was really getting at. That we went through a turbulent period recently. Things have really subsided in the last 6 months or so, and so I was interested in how you feel about that.
So here's what I viewed in the last few years on the committee, and that was that there were certain people who were raising an alarm, and there were interests within the system that were not interested in changing anything, and they marshaled every resource that they could to maintain the status quo. And I'm not really interested in the status quo. I'm clearly positioning myself as someone who's looking to change not only the discourse, but acceptance of mediocrity.
I don't think there's anybody who would propose mediocrity, so you know, you may not be the only one who would agree with that.
Good.
I think the issue is having a commitment, understanding what the role of leadership is and how to do oversight, the difference between oversight and macro or micro management, and getting into individual personalities rather than dealing with the issues before you. And I think you've made a very clear presentation that you're concerned about administrative costs and that impacts on the overall cost of education. I think that's predominantly what you've been saying this morning. Am I correct?
Oh, that's absolutely correct. I have no interest in micromanaging the Amherst School District. If were I interested, I would seek admission to the graduate school in Cambridge and acquire the appropriate credentials and apply for the job. That isn't my interest. My interest is to be a part of the citizen body that's overseeing the use of resources in our community.
And I think that's one of the major roles of school committees. Let's talk about your view of our educational system. Let's talk about the results in terms of kids coming into our school. Are there disparities that you're concerned about? Earlier in the game you mentioned the excessive costs for education.
The excessive cost. I think you're referring to demographics. I believe that all children have the same potential, and there may be biological differences that require some expenditure of resources. The idea in those particular cases is to address the concerns in a collaborative way, to avoid at all costs the legal route. But what I think is very important to understand is that saying that our demographics are resulting in poorer results, which I think was one of the reasons that was cited by school committee members of poorer MCAS results in the last year. I think that's spurious. My judgment is that all the children in our area have the ability to perform very, very well, and we should maintain very high standards and do what it takes. Give them the resources that it takes to help them perform to the best of their ability.
So you're suggesting that maybe they're not getting the resources to achieve higher scores, if that's what you're looking at as an example.
Well, I'm not going to wade into the policy about testing, but what I can say is this. If every kid had new textbooks every year from that $250 a student that we're wasting on administrative costs, or if the athletic and after-school programs were supported by that $250 per kid, the education experience would be more rich and more able to handle what the demands put on it by students.
Let me ask you about all the services beyond the classroom. Are they needed today at all, or do we have our head in the sand and thinking that we don't need administration?
Well, Isaac, when I was in high school, in the early 70s, the head of school taught a class. There was no such thing, or it was rare that someone would just be, maybe there was a secretary, because we had typewriters and nobody could do their own email, or there wasn't such a thing as email. We need people who are engaged and committed to the kids. Show your commitment. Get in, do what it takes to provide more resources to the kids. If that means administrators are getting into classrooms and sharing their expertise, so be it. I would like to see that.
Well, how would you gauge our teachers? Are they doing
my experience? Yeah, so I understand that. My experience is that teachers, by and large, have been very, very good, and I think it's a shame that the administrators are proposing, and the school committee is proposing, school choice to increase class size for a marginal revenue increase that's almost trivial. It's going to put undue pressure on teachers, especially when we have so much excess cash in the system that's being funneled to who knows where. And until we look at the numbers, we won't know.
So if you're elected, we can count on you to look at the books carefully.
Absolutely.
Question every line.
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
What I'm saying is that some people know a lot about business and others know less. And what you're saying is my experience brings me to a point where I can analyze these numbers and show us where $250 can make a big difference in what we deliver for education today.
Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, the difference between Amherst and Northampton, for example, is something like $4,500. That's not $250. And we have to examine why. We have to look at the data, look at the resources, examine best practices. What are they doing over there 10 miles away that we're not, that's delivering about the same results and at much lower cost? And I find it offensive that we haven't already done that.
Well, on that note, we're going to conclude. Is there any final comment that you'd like to make?
Sure. I'm committed to the families of Amherst and the students of Amherst. And I'm driven by the belief that budgetary transparency is the first step toward excellence in education. I don't think I need to remind you that we have the most expensive school district in our area. And my goal is to identify inefficiently allocated resources and return them to students in classrooms. And we will have succeeded when all students, regardless of economic status, thrive in an environment that builds fundamental skills and a love of learning. The children of Amherst count on us to be wise stewards of resources which ensure their future. And thank you very much for inviting me in today.
Good luck.
Thanks.
We've been talking to Michael, and Michael is one of 4 candidates. You can see him online, or you can see the others online in the next few weeks. But remember, the date is April 3rd. That's Election Day right here in Amherst. Good night. See you next week.